Welcome to another episode of Real Life and Politics. We are bringing this show from the Nation's Circle Lounge. Today we are honored to have Mr. Wamalwa with the Institute of Economic Affairs in Nairobi. What do you think about the kind of affair where we have very many MPs? 349 plus senators and so on. Do you think that is sustainable?
That question can be approached from two points of view. First, it's a constitutional provision to have that number of MPs, something that we cannot, we accepted as Kenyans by promulgating the constitution. But another perspective is that it's not expensive. If you look at it in relation to the total spending. The total expenditure is about 40 billion, both houses. And our budget is about 3 trillion. So as a ratio, it's less than 2%
of the total budget.
The total spending. So in that perspective, really, you cannot say it is expensive, but the issue we have, which we should be focused on, is prudent spending, and their objective, that is to ensure they provide oversight to the executive to ensure overall effective spending. That's the issue that we should be, I think, focused on.
Government revenue is about 1.5 trillion per year.
Yes.
Then at the same time, you have a budget of 3 trillion.
Yes.
How would you explain that?
Yeah, that's another critical question. And while the forecast is about 2 trillion, the actual revenue collection is about 1.5, the way you've said. This leads to a lot of budget deficit, which is about 8% of GDP. 8% of GDP. Now, when you look at the medium-term debt management strategy, the target of government is to have the deficit not more than 3% of GDP. So it means that we have breached our own strategies. So the genesis of the problem, I think, is due to breach of all these policies that we have, not sticking to the policies that we have. And over the years, for the last 10 years, we've run a deficit budget. So all this has accumulated to very large debt, which has then led to structural problems in our economy. Yes, so we've been missing on the revenue targets, and this has been explained because of all that issues that we have.
Now we have a situation whereby we have a very poor liquidity ratio, which has led to the fall of the Kenya shilling. How do you explain this?
Yeah, it's true. The shilling is affected by the forces of demand and supply. So you look at the value of the trade transactions, that is the exports and the imports, and also the financial transactions, repayment of the debt, which is done in the foreign currency, and the foreign direct investment, which is also done in the foreign currency. So we have seen weakening of the shilling. From about 100 in 2019, we are now talking about 113 shillings to the USD. So the weakening of the shilling means that there is a huge demand. Huge demand on the shilling, which is causing it to weaken. Our exports are much less than our imports. And so you find that, and also the repayment is large. The repayment of the loan is large, which is causing it to reduce. So weakening of the shilling has a detrimental impact on the economy. Partly it means that the risk exposure on the debt repayment is very high, because you need a lot of shillings to purchase the USD in order to repay. to repay
the loans,
the loans which are repaid in foreign currency. What needs to be done, I think, is the government need to really improve the domestic economy so that we can raise sectors such as manufacturing, which are currently 9, while the target, in the Big Four agenda, the target was to raise it to 15% of GDP, and we are currently less than 10%.
Has it led to decline of economic growth? Because we are having, as you say, we have been having a very big deficit.
The overall economy, when you look at it in terms of the annual growth rate, it has stagnated, actually. The reason why it has stagnated is the structural problems that we've had. One of it is that the access to credit by the private sector, access to credit from the commercial bank has been limited because of that. The government has borrowed heavily from the commercial banks.
Yes.
And so that has led to competition by the between the private sector and government to access these loans. Most of these, when you look at where the funds have been channeled, they have not been channeled in the productive sectors of the economy, such that the investments are not leading to the revenues as it's anticipated. So the government targets to mobilize about 18% of GDP in terms of the total revenue. Currently, we are talking about less than 15%. Yes. So failure to meet the revenue targets is explained by the investment in unproductive sectors of the economy. These are investments that were huge in terms of the total amount of money, but then the revenue that is realized from this is not enough, to make for the government to sustain the budget,
even to pay the loan.
Yes, exactly, because like SGR, it is struggling.
We have a situation whereby for every 100 shillings the government is making,
yes,
we are paying debt with
about
55 shillings.
Yes, 55 shillings.
Yes,
is going towards repayment of debt.
That means we are broke or what? Or we are under distress, debt distress, I think.
Yes, actually, I think the best term to say is the government is faced with debt distress. Its sustainability is questionable. That is, we are not able to continue financing the budget without disrupting other expenditures. For example, when you look at the current budget, it's estimated that about 1 trillion shillings will be used for repayment of debt. And remember, our collection is 1.5, the ordinary revenue.
Per year.
Yes, per year. It means that a lot of funds are being used to repay the debt, and that constrain the budget. So the government is faced with financial constraints.
That means the Kenya government is maybe borrowing to pay other debt.
That's another thing.
Yes.
So, for example, the syndicated loan, in so many situations, even it was raised by the Auditor General, the government is borrowing to refinance some of their debt. Okay, while that is not a breach of the Public Finance and Management Act, the rules in the Public Finance and Management Act, but it shows that the government is struggling to balance its expenditure, the revenues and the expenditures. We should look at the profile of the debt. So most of the debt are being now they're shifting towards the commercial debt, the commercial loans, and these are relatively expensive and short-term in nature. So it means that the interest rate will rise, is rising. So it increases the debt servicing charges, and that causes distress to the government.
Do you think there have been now cases whereby we are delaying disbursement because we have a budget,
yes,
and we have a major budget deficit?
Yes.
That means disbursement will be delayed. That's the releasing of funds for projects.
Yeah. Actually, we have seen that when you look at the quarterly disbursements, there is delayed disbursement of funds, especially in the first quarter. And it's worse on the development part of the budget than it is on recurrent. About 11%, yes, about 14% is disbursed in quarter 1, but about 39% is disbursed in Q4, which means while the deficit, the disbursement that were to be made in the first quarter have been delayed up to the end of the year. And because of the nature of development projects, for example, the requirement to follow the Public Disposal Act, which requires, for example, which has timelines, for example, raising of tenders and all that. Because of the strict nature of that, it delays the implementation of development projects. Yes, and this is further affected by the delay
when funds are released.
Exactly, when funds are released late. One of the things I think should be, I mean, one of the things that causes the delays is poor budget planning, which is due to failure to project the revenue accurately.
How would you explain the poor liquidity ratio that is prevailing?
Yes, so these issues are connected. The issues we've talked about, the huge debt servicing charges due to high repayment of the debt, and the shortfalls in revenue. All this leads to unfavorable debt liquidity ratio. So one of the ratio is the debt service to revenue ratio. The threshold is 30%, and currently we are talking about 55%. Yes. Now, because of the interest and principal, it means that we are collecting most of the funds that are collected are not really. You see, there's a mismatch between the value for money that we get from the investment, given that we've shifted towards expensive loans.
What impact do you think the current budget situation have on the election currently?
In terms of the patterns that we see across the election cycles, we see the consumption rise rapidly during the election years. We have a lot of dishing out of money. Campaign, the nature of our campaigns involve a lot of spending, a lot of rallies and all that. So there is rise in the consumption. So the effect is that, and this is not just the government or public expenditure, this is spending from the private, because these are individual politicians with their own private money bringing it to campaigns. So the effect of that to the economy is that there is a tendency for inflation to rise because of high consumption level. So inflation affects disproportionately affects the poor.
What do you think about the hustler narrative in particular?
Yeah. Thank you about that question. The hustler narrative, I'm aware about it, and my view is that it is appealing to the ordinary citizens, but it has its own challenges. The money will be channeled to the low units of the economy, and that it's expected that then the growth will be generated from the low level upwards. That may not really be practical. While it's a good idea, it's not really practical in our context, because we need institutions that can manage
that money,
spending effective expenditure of this money. Our effort should be directed more towards general effective expenditure of money, rather than putting money at the very bottom. Remember, devolution is also one aspect of bottom-up approach. The CDF was also one of the approaches of the bottom-up.
Yes.
But then the lessons that we learned is that we really need to be serious on implementing some of the reports that come from these oversight institutions. The focus should be on ensuring effective, prudent spending, rather than issuing money to the local units in our context. The total amount of money that was not spent effectively and lawfully is about 350 billion. The focus should be more about effective spending, reducing corruption, rather than channeling money at the local level. That's not our major concern. Yes.
How can we improve the absorption of the budget? Do you think it would be wise to revive the BBI?
No, I don't think so. So I don't think that we need to have an expanded parliament. I don't think so. Within the framework, the constitutional framework, I think we can, the 2/3 gender representation can still be achieved if we think around the current numbers that we have.
We have two houses of parliament. We have the National Assembly, and of course we have parliament, the lower house, and then we have the Senate.
Yes.
Do you think we really need both houses when we have such a very heavy budget to support?
Okay, first, I don't think that that's something that we can really question, especially given that it's a constitutional, the constitutional houses provided for in the Constitution. And actually, I think they perform different functions. So the Senate is there to oversee the involved, the involved system.
Units,
Yes. National Assembly is more of to the national functions. Yeah. So I do not think we should because of the separate functions, we should dissolve them. The civic education should be around the type of leadership that Kenyans want, and we should elect leaders that are able to really provide effective oversight.
Do you think it would be wise to revive the BBI given the kind of heavy budget we have now, heavy burden that the country has?
No, my straight answer is no. I do not.
It should not be revived.
No. I don't think BBI is necessary. So the main issue about our constitution is the leadership, governance and leadership that we have. Not really about the nature of the constitution and the provisions. Now, I think what we really need is to, some of the provisions in the BBI were not really major issues of concern, and were not really, did not really require we did not really require the amendment of the Constitution. For example, award the 3% budget to the judiciary, or issues around health. So I think all these issues, most of the issues actually could be achieved if the current leadership were to decide and implement.
So they didn't need to be done.
Yes, and even the 2/3 that can be achieved if the leadership.
The 2/3 gender rule.
Yes, the 2/3 gender representation rule. The current leadership, it can still implement if they have the goodwill.
Which kind of situation do you foresee in September when we have a new government?
The challenges that we have, some of these challenges that we've highlighted, they really be prominent in next year, especially the high debt servicing charges. The government will continue to really struggle in repayment of the debt.
Yes.
And we have some of the projects that were initiated, for example, the Lapset corridor, the Lamu port and all that. So, and SGR is not yet finished. So all this...
and the Nairobi Express will just have been hopefully finished at that time.
Yes. So all this will put a lot of pressure on the budget. Yes. So that's the scenario that I foresee.
So the new government will be under a lot of pressure.
Yes, that's what I believe.
And do you think they can carry out their pledges? The various pledges they have made, the 6,000 poor family, the bottom up, whatever.
Yes, actually that's why I said this pledge of 6,000 and the bottom-up approach really is not it's not pragmatic in this context. But I think it can. What the government needs to do is to streamline, to reduce the spending. As Kenyans, we should take the initiative because this is our country, and we should take the initiative to right the wrongs that have been done. And the elective season is an opportunity for us to exercise our right to elect effective leadership. We need to really exercise by electing the right leaders who we believe will provide effective oversight to the leadership. We need to be conscious of the fact that we cannot get ourselves in a situation whereby we are not able to finance the core, the basic services. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noah Wamalwa of the Institute of Economic Affairs.
Yes.
We are very thankful to you and your team. I know you work as a team to do for us such a good analysis, and I hope the young people will listen to this, because we are facing a very critical time in our country. It could reach a time when we are not able to pay our loans. What will we do? You see?
Yes, true.
Thank you also to the Nation Circle Lounge, which is based here in the city center on Moi Avenue, among the best places to enjoy your meals. You can have mbuzi choma, nyama choma here at a very good price. Drinks also in the evening for those who go for sundowners. And I hope we can do it again, Mr. Wamalwa. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.